terminar señalando que lamentablemente hay personas que han querido abusar y delinquir, intentando cobrar telefónicamente por hacer llegar una caja a alguna familia. Quiero insistir, el programa Alimentos para Chile, impulsado por el presidente Sebastián Piñera, es un programa, primero, totalmente gratuito. En segundo lugar,
Compita por la rechucha, hasta que ahora lo espero, Compita no sea tan huequere que suéltese el chiquitín. Compita no sea tan huequere que suéltese el chiquitín. Suele el chiquitín.
Les pido paciencia y condenar, desde luego, esos intentos por engañar a nuestros vecinos de la región metropolitana. Muchas gracias.
Ahí están entonces las palabras del intendente Felipe Guevara y de la vocera Carla Rubilar con respecto a la entrega de los alimentos. Vamos a volver a la entrevista, solamente recapitular los datos principales que se han entregado. Hoy se han entregado 27.200 canastas y el total a nivel nacional llega a 126.082. Eso es el 5% del total que se ha comprometido, que son 2,5 millones de canastas familiares. Si se mantuviera el ritmo de hoy, que se ha alcanzado en el día de hoy, demoraría 3 meses el total de la entrega de las canastas restantes en este programa que ha sido comprometido con el gobierno por la entrega de 2,5 millones de cajas de mercadería en total a nivel nacional. Vamos a volver a nuestra entrevista, Diego Pardo, que nos está esperado amablemente. Diego, muchas gracias por durante este breaking. Quiero seguir en lo que estábamos. Decíamos, se puede triplicar el número de fallecimientos de acuerdo a la curva que llevan los contagios. Y el gobierno ha cambiado de manera el tono. Por ejemplo, escuchamos al ministro Mañalich decir que las fórmulas con las que él había trabajado y los modelos en que él había creído se habían derrumbado como un castillo de naipes. Efectivamente, eran malos los modelos, malas las fórmulas que se estaban trabajando. ¿Qué pasó?
Yo o sea, él no hizo explícito cuáles eran esos modelos ni cuáles eran los datos en los que se había basado, solo que se cayeron. O sea, hay una interpretación posible de los dichos del ministro, hay que tener mucho cuidado, que es la que nosotros, como intentamos en nuestro último informe, tratar de evitar que sea la que prime, digamos. Pareciera, uno podría leer esos dichos como que, bueno, la ciencia no me sirvió, entonces ahora voy a improvisar. Eso sería la peor de las decisiones. Incluso si los modelos que utilizaron o las maneras de análisis que utilizaron para fallar, digamos, este no es el momento de poner menos ciencia, es el momento de poner más ciencia sobre la mesa, más voces a cargo de analizar las estrategias del gobierno y no, digamos, y no dejar de recurrir tanto a modelos de análisis como estrategias de evaluación de las políticas que está implementando el gobierno. Entonces, o sea, uno valora que haya esa humildad actual en el ministro en el sentido de reconocer que la estrategia anterior era equivocada, pero sería complejo interpretar eso como una renuncia a la ciencia. Al contrario, lo que hay que hacer es redoblar la apuesta por la ciencia, esta vez de una manera más convocante, involucrando personas e instituciones que no necesariamente van a pensar igual que los que ya están adentro, pero sobre la base de esta pluralidad conseguir un diagnóstico más.
¡No, ya me cago! El modelo que ustedes han utilizado para hacer sus proyecciones desde el comienzo de la crisis, ¿se ha derrumbado o es un modelo que ha funcionado?
Nosotros, en verdad, son bastante sencillos.
Ya le transferí a tu mamá, así que está listo. Por hoy no puedo transferir más, así que, pero estamos listos. ¿Ya? ¿Le pasaste la plata al agua?
Si la velocidad de contagio desde que estamos contando que la cuarentena ha triplicado, digamos, lo lógico sería que, digamos, los fallecimientos pasan exactamente lo mismo. No son, en ese sentido, modelos mucho más sofisticados que eso. Nosotros simplemente hemos tratado de visualizar los datos públicos a los que tenemos acceso y, digamos, llamar la atención sobre ciertas tendencias que nos parecían preocupantes, como la que conversamos recién respecto de las cuarentenas dinámicas a mediados de abril.
Es que llama muchísimo la atención porque yo he seguido cada uno de los informes que ustedes han planteado y es bien llamativo porque puede ser fácil decirlo ahora, ¿no? Pero lo interesante es haberlo dicho en el momento. Cuando el gobierno estaba diciendo, por ejemplo, que ya estábamos en una meseta, ustedes decían que no, que esto efectivamente iba creciendo. Cuando se decía que el aumento del número de contagios tenía que ver ver simplemente con que estaban tomando mayor cantidad de exámenes. Ustedes decían que eso no era cierto, que lo que pasa es que efectivamente el porcentaje de positividad de los exámenes iba creciendo, por lo tanto no era solamente que hubiera más exámenes, sino que había otros factores también. Cuando uno ve esas cifras y las analiza ahora, ¿qué pasó? ¿El gobierno no quiso ver lo que estaba ocurriendo? ¿Quiso ver solamente las cifras que podían sostener su tesis, que era más optimista? ¿Cómo analizan ustedes? Porque es una disparidad que hemos visto día a día, comparando lo que dice y hace el gobierno con los informes que también plantean ustedes varias veces a la semana.
O sea, es que mira, el ejemplo que tú estás poniendo de la positividad a mí me parece que es un muy buen ejemplo. Solo para ponerlo como, digamos, para que la gente pueda entender de qué estamos hablando. La positividad es básicamente una fracción donde tú pones en el numerador el número de positivos, digamos, y en el denominador el total de test. Digamos, son los test positivos dividido por el total de test. Si tú lo haces, que como lo hacía al principio del gobierno, y lo que evalúas diariamente es la positividad total o la positividad acumulada, ese es un número que con los órdenes de magnitud que están involucrados, digamos, cuando tú tienes 2 meses para atrás de testeo, no iba a cambiar diariamente, no tenía sentido hablar de la positividad acumulada, porque era un número que obviamente debía cambiar. Lo que nosotros dijimos era, tienes que mirar la positividad diaria, o tienes que mirar el promedio semanal de la positividad, que son, digamos, son los números que pueden decir algo sobre lo que está pasando. Entonces, nuestro análisis no era mucho más sofisticado ni descansaba en un modelo particularmente complejo, sino que simplemente tenía en cuenta que un número muy grande, digamos, tú no lo vas a conseguir cambiar de un día para otro. Entonces, si tú miras ese número más grande que está diseñado para no cambiar, entonces no te va a dar señales respecto de la tendencia que tú quieres observar en ese día. Y de nuevo, ¿eso por qué es importante? Porque la positividad, digamos, es un indicativo de la cifra negra de contagios que tú tienes. Si tú tienes una positividad muy grande, significa que la cantidad de test positivos que tú tienes no es representativa de la cantidad de contagios reales que deberías observar en la población. ¿Sí? Entonces, y esto, de nuevo, tampoco es, digamos, es un misterio. Si uno mira las recomendaciones de la OMS, lo que dice es que la positividad debería estar cercana o bajo el 10%, del umbral del 10%. Y lo que nosotros vemos diariamente, especialmente en la región metropolitana, son positividades diarias del 30, del 40%, casi del 50%, o sea, 3, 4 y 5 veces, digamos, la recomendación de la Organización Mundial de la Salud. En esas condiciones, decir que, como dijo el ministro, estamos testeando más de lo suficiente, o sea, más de lo que necesitamos, estamos...
Iba a tener repercusiones en materia de salud mental, porque muchas familias efectivamente viven hacinadas, porque muchas familias viven en 20, 25 metros cuadrados más de 10 personas, porque hay poblaciones más vulnerables, como son las poblaciones migrantes, los adultos mayores que muchas veces viven solos, las personas en situación de calle, para quienes teníamos que preparar programas especiales. Si sabíamos del hacinamiento de muchos lugares y por tanto creamos la residencia sanitaria a partir del 1 de abril, para que todo aquel que no pudiera cumplirla porque no tenía las condiciones en su casa, por las diferencias y desigualdades que existen en nuestro país, pudiera cumplirla en otro lugar con buen cuidado. Por lo tanto, sí le puedo asegurar que el gobierno del presidente Piñera, sobre la mesa del Comité de Crisis de Coronavirus, siempre ha tenido claras las desigualdades y las dificultades para enfrentar las medidas sanitarias.
Ministra, pero eso el titular de salud, Jaime Mañalich, no lo tenía claro, así él lo reconoció en el día de hoy, no se registró hacinamiento y pobreza en ciertos sectores. Entonces, ¿se equivocó el ministro al acelerar esto?
El gobierno tiene profundamente claro las diferencias, las desigualdades que tenemos, no solamente dentro de las comunas de Santiago, sino que también las diferencias que tenemos entre las regiones de nuestro país. Y es por eso que desde el primer minuto dijimos que decretar las cuarentenas totales tenía que ser en el momento oportuno, porque sin duda alguna, enfrentar una cuarentena total, cuando uno vive en condiciones más precarias, cuando vive en hacinamiento, cuando efectivamente sale al día a día a trabajar para el ingreso, para llevar el pan a su mesa, no es lo mismo que en otros lugares. Y es esa conciencia de la realidad de nuestro país la que nos ha llevado a tomar...
¡Adelante! ¡Miren al enemigo!
¡Ah!
En marcha y tómese posición. Enemigos en camino.
He's joined by other former Lashma students, all back in school. They give devices to hospitals for free, with raw material costs covered by crowdfunding. They've helped thousands of people across the country. And if shields get noticed for today, they'll soon be helping thousands more. I'm Marwa David in Istanbul, and this is CNN. As the nation mourns more than 100,000 lives lost to this virus, one story provoked the most powerful response from you, the people watching. Joe Lewinter passed away. He was 42 years old. He left behind his wife and 3 children, and he was absolutely beloved by his students.
Oh, concha tu madre.
He spent 20 years working as
Se
an
está
assistant
viendo.
principal and a girls' basketball coach at a Catholic high school. He had no known pre-existing conditions. It started out as just a virus, a little sick. His health had deteriorated quickly. He ended up on a ventilator and died. Because of the virus, his wife was not allowed to be with him physically as he passed away. But she did say she felt she was with him.
Puta, está adelante el hijo de puta.
I thanked him. I thanked him for being the most amazing husband. For making me feel cherished and loved every single day. Every single day, my husband wrote me beautiful letters.
Oh, el buen rajudo.
Not just have a great day, but just beautiful letters about what I meant to him. I thanked him. And then I prayed. And the doctor took the phone.
Aeronave de reconocimiento enemiga en el aire.
And then I played our wedding song for him. And then, that was it. Way 2 months ago today, and more towards me tonight. And more, it's impossible for me, for anyone to understand how you're feeling every day. What can you tell us about these 2 months and your life now? It's hard to believe that it's 2 months already today. I explain how I get through the day by saying that I pretend that this is happening to us and
Oh,
our
la
family,
puta
our
madre.
friends, our community. I pretend that he's not going to be missing from every event going forward. That's the only way to get through the minutia of the day. And being able to care for my children and being able to smile at my students through the screen. And I know some of the smallest, some of the seemingly smallest things have just been the things that have brought this to you more than anything else, just everyday things. As far as reminders, everyday things. Yes, I see him everywhere. I see him everywhere when I'm sitting on the couch having coffee, and I look across, and that's where he's staring back at me. And I'm in the kitchen, and I'm at the sink, and he's over at the stove, or vice versa. He's everywhere. He's in my children's faces. He's in every song that I hear. He's in all my thoughts. Spending time in the backyard and having a fire pit and watching the logs burn and thinking about looking like lava and thinking about how we were supposed to be in 2023 to get in trouble.
Oh, la puta madre.
Aeronave de reconocimiento enemiga en el aire.
Enemigo avisado en el remolque de comunicaciones.
¡Lanzamos una bomba a cubierto!
And I know part of how you are doing that is your children, beautiful children that you have. You say you see his face in them. Your 3 children, 2 in high school, your little one, just 6 years old. How are they doing, Laura? They're doing amazingly well. They're such well-rounded joys. They, my older two have been through a lot in their life. So having the experience they did when they were small has just made them these light spirits of beauty. Just, they have an amazing presence.
Ah, con la chucha
And
madre.
my little one she just wants to be them. She just wants to follow everything and do everything they did. They talk about Joe, we talk about
Oh no.
it's based on communication. We just always have talked about everything, how we feel, what we think of things.
Aeronave de reconocimiento enemiga en el aire.
Joe and I didn't everything about the world, and they always knew that listening to each other and supporting each other is the foundation of family
El peñasco.
relationship. So that continues. That definitely continues with every day. Parents, I mean,
Ay,
people
con la
were so good,
chucha.
right, Laura? You just were an unforgettably great presence. It larger than life for so many. One of our viewers who was especially moved by your story, Austin Mole, I know he wrote a song and he reached out to you after he saw you, and so I know you've heard, but you inspired this, and I wanted to just play a bit of it.
Hoy me saca.
He had a message for you,
Aeronave de
Laura, that he
reconocimiento
shared with
enemiga en
us
el
today.
aire.
I just want to read it to you. He said, "This song is a love letter from a first responder. It touched me so deeply.
Ah, con la rechucha. Como el hoyo.
Thank you for sharing your story. What you've done has helped me believe that the power of love is infinite, eternal, and healing in writing this song. It's incredible what you have given so many. When you suffer such a great loss, you expect to be
Pobrecito.
De junio, y les voy a contar cuáles son para mí las mejores ligas de fútbol del mundo. Seguridad que no está conectada.
Plan seguro.
Ahí está entonces la información respecto a la seguridad y esta encuesta que nos deja
Plan
estas dos
Azazán.
conclusiones algo contradictorias. Te doy el pase, Daniel.
Muchísimas gracias, Eduardo. Buenas tardes. Dejamos hasta aquí esta agenda informativa. Ya viene Agenda Económica con Nicolás Paut y nos reencontramos a las 8:30 en el informativo superior.
Buenos días, tengo un seguro hogar con ustedes. ¿Me cubriría si me entran a robar? ¿Y qué pasaría si... Pero imagina que...
tranquila. Para todo eso, aquí está.
Porque si te pasa, que te pillen con HDI Seguros. Conoce más en hdi.cl.
Azazán.
Mantente firme, enfocado en una misión. Sí, y entonces ellos siguen. ¿Se siente un poco mejor o no?
Atacama informando para que estos días de pandemia tú te quedes.
¿Te quieres?
Beautiful thing, and with BBC News. Well, it definitely has been a healing experience to be supported by so many, including yourself. So I thank you so
Duelo por
much.
equipos. Acabe con el equipo enemigo.
Azazán.
Always, and I thank all of you for being with us, our global town hall stars.
que sea con todas sus fuerzas.
Good evening, welcome. I'm Anderson Cooper, New York.
Hey Anderson, I'm Dr. Sanjay Gupta, and this is our 13th consecutive CNN Global Town Hall, Coronavirus Facts and Fears. This program tonight is being seen around the world on CNN International, CNN Espanol, and also streamed on CNN.com.
In the 4 months since this virus started to kill in this country, more than 100,000 people have died here. When we did our first town hall,
Puta la wea, conche tu madre, weón.
12 weeks later, the death toll has surpassed 100,000. It's hard to even imagine that number, let alone make sense of it, and for all the comparisons made, so many 9/11s, this many Hurricane Katrinas, war, there's simply, sadly, this. For every story of every life that deserves
¿Qué pasó? ¿Azazai?
it would take weeks to tell them all, and days just to read their names. And that is just one awful measure of this tragedy. Just counted 2 in all the mothers and fathers, grandparents and children, brothers and sisters, friends and neighbors who died without being held by those who loved them most. Just counted every parent taken off a ventilator and every child watched on FaceTime instead of being there.
Toma mierda.
This tragedy is measured in the medical students who went straight from school to the busiest ICUs on Earth, and in the weeks that went by without testing that made them so busy by letting the outbreak spread. It's built
Ah, la puta madre.
every falsehood uttered and every truth told, and the sadness surrounding those 100,000 deaths is joined by the pain of more than 40 million people in this country. About 1 in 4 Americans unable to provide for their families or even themselves. So much has brought us to this point, and so much lies ahead, not all of it known. And that's our focus tonight, what we know and what we still don't know about this virus that has now taken more than 100,000 lives.
And helping us tonight, experts on the medicine and the science. We want to hear from you, so tweet us your questions with the hashtag CNN Town Hall, and leave a comment on the CNN Facebook page. A lot of you have already sent in video questions as well.
Oh, la puta madre.
Reports from across the country and around the world. We also have some breaking news just in from the CDC, which has just published a new forecast. It's based on more than a dozen individual models from outside institutions.
Avión de reconocimiento enemigo avisado.
23,000 lives lost by June 20th. That's the projection. In other words, in the next 3 weeks or so, another 22,000 Americans may die, according to the CDC projection.
Puta.
So soon after such a bitter milestone.
Avión de reconocimiento enemigo avistado.
More than 100,000 people in the U.S. have died from the coronavirus. 7 million people have tested positive.
Está muerto.
Toma. Oh, hijo de puta. Andan juntos los conche tu madre. Están sacando la chucha.
Artillería enemiga, a cubierto.
Even New York State, the epicenter of the outbreak, has begun reopening. New York City remains largely closed. The entertainment industry is slowly coming back. Some Las Vegas hotels and casinos plan to reopen next week. Theme parks in Florida, including Disney World, are also making plans to reopen. Health officials are urging everyone to keep wearing masks in public. They want to make it be a simple for people to see that that's the kind of thing you should be doing. This week, the CDC issued guidelines on how to return to work safely, which include air filtration systems and they also warn that any test should not be used to determine when people can go back to work, because up to 50% of the test could be inaccurate.
Oh, ¿cómo no me lo eché?
Experts say we're still in the early days of this pandemic.
For all the suffering, pain, death, and so forth we've had so far, only about 5% of citizens have been infected, and this virus is not going to last until it gets to 60 or 70%.
This week in so many ways, with new cases fluctuating state by state, reopening announcements coming, vaccine developments, new guidance from the CDC.
Oh, gracias.
Yeah, Anderson, it feels like the nation is collectively holding its breath right now, waiting and anticipating to see what's going to happen next. We know for sure the virus is still out there.
Puta la wea.
And we know that several states applying particular
Avión de reconocimiento
Vamos
enemigo
a
avistado.
infiltrar.
surge of people being infected. At the same time, we know, as you mentioned, Anderson, there are states that are
¿Dónde
holding
estoy
steady,
disparando,
even
weón?
tracking downward. And it seems in many of those places, policies are reopened, but the people are still doing all they can to keep their distance, wear a mask, reduce everyone's exposure. And we know that makes a difference, a big one. We should be clear on this, and this should inspire people. There are places around the world that have started to reopen safely, and they did it with no other tools than the ones we have. Just aggressive action and done early. There are lessons that we have to learn here, and if we apply those lessons now, tracing or mask wearing, but also more compassion and empathy, because we are still very much all in this together. If we get that part of it right, then I think we may be able to finally catch our breath.
Well, that said, there's also this notion of just wanting to be done with the virus already, the upheaval it's causing in so many lives, even those we've been discussing, the virus is really
Oh, fue el punto de victoria.
developments tonight. So for a closer look, we're joined now by CNN's Jason Carroll. So Jason, take a look at the states. Yeah, I understand that Governor Kemp just said that Georgia is trending favorably. Is that
I think a lot of health experts out there, Anderson, would say favorably is a stretch. The numbers in Georgia are basically flat. You know, they were up, they were down, but at this point they're basically flat. As you know, in the state of Georgia, the governor basically said, look, you know, you can have no more than 10 people who can gather. Now he says, as of June 1st, that number is going to go up to 25 people. And some of his critics were saying, look, why are you doing that? Your numbers aren't great. He says if there's
or the charges ended up being dropped. So a very, very sensitive situation there.
Uncle Zon!
Yeah, and David, it's not just Minneapolis that we've seen protests in, is it?
Across the country, there was a violent one here in LA last night. At least parts of it were violent. 2 police cars were attacked. And I think this sums up the more or less continuous string of instances of black men, unarmed black men, dying at the hands of white officers, or in the case of a recent incident in Georgia, at the hands of perhaps white local vigilantes. A feeling here very much that this has to stop, and of course with people with time on their hands because of the COVID virus, being quarantined behind bars, people coming out now to demonstrate increasingly following the death of George Floyd. Lewis.
David, President Trump's spokesperson has been commenting on this, saying that I believe Donald Trump has seen the video.
That's right. She also said that whilst there was no problem with protesting, she urged people there in Minneapolis to do so peacefully. Donald Trump said yesterday that it was very sad and that he was calling for the FBI to investigate this with urgency, which indeed they are doing. That emerged from the press conference today. But, you know, anybody who saw that video couldn't help but be horrified by those, nearly 8 minutes in which that police officer, that white police officer, is seen with his boot on the neck of George Floyd.
Eliminen al enemigo.
Okay, thanks, David.
En marcha y tome su posición. Enemigos en camino.
Now, the British Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab says he's going to make it easier for some Hong Kong citizens to move to the UK unless China reconsiders implementing its new national security law. US, Canada, Australia and the UK released a joint statement saying the law, which is designed to criminalise active subversion, would curtail individual liberties.
Puta la wea, cabrón, pura lenta, weón.
As they arrived creatively in Parliament, the square was quiet. There are no protests over lockdowns here. Inside, China's president had a spring in his step, bringing the virus and for a system untroubled by messy democratic no starker illustration of that than this. a new national security law imposed on Hong Kong with 2,878 votes in favour and just one against. The fear that any anti-China protest might now be classed as subversion has led to an international outcry, including this surprise announcement for the 300,000 Hong Kongers who hold British overseas passports.
If China continues down this path and implements this national security legislation, we will change that status and we will remove that 6-month limit and allow those BNO passports to come to the UK and to apply to work and study itself, provide a pathway to future citizenship.
The move will infuriate China, which insists its new law will target only a minority of demonstrators.
The decision adopted is designed to steady one country, two systems, and Hong Kong's prosperity.
But China is slowly tightening control. As its father came to a close in Beijing,
Aeronave de reconocimiento enemiga en el aire.
¡Me mató todo! ¡Chuche tu madre!
Respecting China's national anthem, a criminal offense. John Sutton, BBC News, Beijing.
Victoria Hoy is Associate Professor.
Artillería enemiga a cubierto.
So last year we saw this overwhelming and an escalating protest against an extradition bill because that would have allowed Beijing to request to have anyone in Hong Kong, not just Hong Kong people, but also you guys, anyone visiting Hong Kong, to be to turn over and crossing the border. And this bill, this new bill, is actually okay. You guys don't want this. Well, in addition to we guys transfer you over the border. We are also going to send state security agents to come to Hong Kong so that, we are going to just basically be able to keep a tab on everyone. And this is really scary to many people, just the idea that you have central state security agents and especially the secret police in Hong Kong.
Victoria, you said the word scary there to many people. Other pro-democracy activists and campaigners in Hong Kong will be the end of Hong Kong as we know it. Would you go that far?
No es preocupado siempre por la rechucha, madre.
Say Hong Kong is going to become just another China city. I'm worried that it could be worse. In fact, yes, this is definitely the end of one country, two systems. How bad is this going to be? Beijing wants to make Hong Kong into Macau, with basically mainlanders who've been groomed to become Macau citizens to run Macau. And it's trying to do the same thing in Hong Kong. The national security bill is actually modeled on what's being already done in Macau. The problem is the opposition is very weak in Macau, but in Hong Kong, the majority of the people supports protest. And he wants to silence all these people.
Okay, but if that's Victoria, sorry to interrupt, if that stifling does take place, what sanctions realistically can the US and the UK do? How can it stop this from being
It is, and the first step is to recognize that no longer enjoys the and then just heard today that the UK government is going to give to operate officials and institutions and state that's also important. On top of that, maybe Beijing really wants to treat Hong Kong as just like
Tres al hilo.
as a whole rest of the world are just responding. If you wish to have that's to happen, this is your wish.
Okay, interesting to have your analysis and thoughts on that hugely important issue. Thank you very much for talking to us. And that's Victoria. Next, back to the US. President Trump has signed an executive order targeting social media companies. He said companies including Google, Facebook and Twitter had unchecked power to censor and restrict the views of users. When it comes after Twitter on Wednesday posted fact-check labels on 2 of the president's posts. He had claimed that postal ballots would lead to voter fraud in this year's election. Twitter reacted with this warning, which linked to other sources of information on voting processes. While Mr. Trump has regularly accused social media platforms of stifling or censoring conservative voices, he repeated his criticisms as he signed the executive order.
They've had unchecked power to censor, restrict, edit, shape, hide, alter virtually any form of communication between private citizens or large public audiences. There's no precedent in American history for so small a number of corporations to control so large a sphere of human interaction, and that includes individual people controlling vast amounts of territory, and we can't allow that to happen.
Our senior reporter in Washington, Anthony Zerka, explained what this executive order would mean.
We have to look at the heart of this executive order is instructing federal agencies, independent federal agencies, to take another look at a federal law dating back to 1996, which gives social media companies protections from lawsuits based on the content generated by their users. For instance, if someone went on Twitter and tweeted something libelous, the person who was liable can't sue Twitter. It's a broad protection that social media companies need. Otherwise, they'd have to police millions of posts a day. So it's a threat, essentially, trying to force Twitter and other social media companies to do what the president wants. And what the president wants is to back away from attaching these sorts of messages, warnings to his tweets, and more broadly to engage in what they see as censorship of conservative voices on the platform. The reality, however, is the law is the law, and if they're going to try to change this, it would be a long process with regulations and lawsuits afterwards. Donald Trump also talked about changing legislation laws passed through Congress to more directly address this, and that is realistically would be a more effective way to do this, although the chances of that also are relatively remote.
Anthony Zerka. Right, stay with us here on BBC News. Still to come, easing the lockdown in England and Scotland. We'll have more on the do's and don'ts as rules and guidance changes from Monday onwards.
In the biggest international sporting spectacle ever seen, up to 30 million people have taken part in sponsored athletics events to aid famine relief in Africa.
The first of what the makers of Star Wars hoped would be thousands of teams started forming at 7 a.m.
Taunting which led to scuffles, scuffles to fighting, fighting to full-scale riot, as the Liverpool fans broke out of their area and into the Juventus enclosure. The Belgian police had lost control.
The whole world will mourn the tragic death of Mr. Nehru's death. He was the father of the Indian people on the day of independence.
The Oprah Winfrey Show comes to an end. After 25 years and more than 4,500 episodes, the chat show has made her one of the richest people on the planet.
Jerry Halliwell, otherwise known as Ginger Spice, has announced she's left the Spice Girls.
I don't believe it. She's the one with bounce, go, girl power, little Jerry boy.
This is BBC News. I'm Lewis Vaughan-Jones. The latest headlines. The National Guard has been called in to quell protests in the American city of Minneapolis following unrest over the killing of an African-American man by police. The US, Britain, Canada and Australia have issued a joint statement warning that China's new national security law would curtail individual liberties in Hong Kong. Next, Boris Johnson has announced a further easing of lockdown in England. He said that from Monday, up to 6 people from different households could meet outside. He said people should meet up indoors and should maintain social distancing. Meanwhile, police said his top advisor, Dominic Cummings, who's been at the centre of a political storm after he was accused of breaking lockdown restrictions, may have done so in one minor instance. CumpaCris report.
What will it look like on the other side? The reflections of a new reality slowly starting to appear. A different life after lockdown as the rules begin to relax. The Prime Minister made it official today. In England, the next phase is on the way.
I cannot and will not throw away all the gains we have made together. And so the changes we are making are limited and cautious. It's thanks to the caution we've shown so far that all 5 tests are being met.
That means from Monday, as long as you keep your distance, some freedom will return.
We will allow up to 6 people to meet outside, provided those from different households continue strictly to observe social distancing rules. These changes mean that friends and family can start to meet their loved ones, perhaps seeing both parents at once or both grandparents at once. And I know that for many people this will be a long-awaited and joyful moment.
This is not a click your fingers moment when suddenly things will snap back to normal. And moving safely into a different looking world depends on all of us still respecting the government's keep your distance rules. But could that be more complicated after the last few torrid days?
There was an outcry when it was revealed that the Prime Minister's top advisor travelled from London to Durham and made a 60-mile separate journey out of lockdown to this very Barnard Castle. The police said today they would have told Dominic Cummings to go back to his family home if they had stopped him that day, concluding there might have been a minor breach of the rules.
If one of your most senior team wasn't paying proper attention to the rules, why should anyone else? And to the doctors, if I may, is that the kind of example that you want people to follow?
Durham police said was that they were going to take no action and that the matter was closed, and I intend to draw a line under the matter. You've asked Chris and Patrick, but I'm going to interpose myself, if I may, and protect them from what I think would be an unfair and unnecessary attempt to ask a political question. It's very, very important that our medical officers and scientific advisors do not get dragged into what I think most people will recognise is fundamentally a political argument.
But the pressure on the Prime Minister won't disappear.
Nobody should be stopped from answering questions from journalists, but it's the...
Movimiento en la cubierta de estribor. Duelo por equipos. Acaben con todas las fuerzas del eje. Denle guerra, que sea con todas.
Bien, Julito, po. Bien hecho. Cuídese el culo. Voy hablando de sumario. ¿Se ha sabido algo del sumario de mi tía?
Abierta de estribor.
Oh, conche tu madre.
¡Nos están superando!
Puta madre.
¡Movimiento junto a la chimenea! ¡Granada lanzada! ¡Nos flanquean otros botes salvavidas! ¡Avión de reconocimiento enemigo avistado!
Lentitud.
¡Avión de reconocimiento enemigo avistado! ¡En las escaleras! Están junto a los botes salvavidas. ¡Me dieron! ¡Me dieron!
Chucha.
Our weather system, as it moves north through Argentina, does go through Buenos Aires, so it will be wetter for a time and the temperatures come down. Developing tropical weather system not far from southern Mexico, that's the coast of Central America, will pepper the downpours here. The potential for some flash flooding and mudslides through southern areas of Mexico into parts of Central America, and also some strong storms through eastern parts of Mexico. Added to the Caribbean as well, frequent downpours to be found here, daily showers into Havana, some of those into Kingston, Jamaica as well, but certainly not all the time. That's it for now. Bye-bye.
Wuhan, China's economic heartland, and the epicenter of a global pandemic.
The city at the heart of a public health crisis in China is shutting its public transport network to try to prevent the spread of the virus.
In the spring of 2017, we set out to follow the fortunes of two companies as they fought to establish themselves in the city's optics valley. A dedicated zone for new technology enterprises, it's part of the move to transform the city's economy. This is the story of some of the people who live and work in the city.
我也找你做好这个事儿，可能后面这种结果就很少。你说野心大吗？一般是野心，都想实现真正财富自由。
And the story of Wuhan before and after the arrival of the coronavirus that would change all of our lives.
Get your daily roundup on the coronavirus outbreak from the Coronavirus Global Update podcast. With reports from affected areas, details of the latest medical information, plus the impact on health, business and travel. Available from bbc.com or your podcast provider.
Many airlines are spending the lockdown figuring out ways to get us back on board once the crisis is over. But how can we do that while still social distancing? We get some answers. And we see how New York's iconic yellow taxis are up against the wall. And we visit a, for once, deserted Angkor Wat in Cambodia. All this and more on The Travel Show on BBC World News.
On Front Row, I'll be exploring the power of poetry with Game of Thrones actor and Clark. Why do we turn to poetry in times of crisis? Helen Mirren performs a poem especially for us. Join me, Mary Beard, on BBC World News.
Now on BBC World News, Click looks at the new media tools set to revolutionise business and personal life. And for more, use #BBCClick.
This week, can taking your temperature stop the spread of coronavirus? Or will genetics be the answer?
maybe you're just trying to drown out the noise.
Avión de reconocimiento en el aire. Tenemos más potencia de fuego.
Shan't I? Maybe not just now. Got to happen soon though, hasn't it? Welcome. Hope you're well. Laura's online too. How are you, mate?
I'm good, thanks. I tried to edit out my roots before posting a picture on social media yesterday. Didn't work, I had to give up.
It's going to go crazy soon, isn't it? Listen, I've got something to cover up there, Heather, if you're interested. Take a look at this.
Oh goodness, that looks a bit dramatic.
Yeah, it's a thermal imaging helmet. Now, the idea is it can quickly screen people to check for fever. It's already being used in China, but the company now says they're talking to governments and police forces across the UK, Europe, and the Middle East.
It looks quite menacing, but impressive if it does the job.
Yeah, and around the world, companies and governments are looking at testing people's temperatures to try and spot those who might have COVID-19. Vodafone is another company that's rolling out thermal imaging with a camera which can scan up to 8 people at a time. They say it's accurate to within 0.3 degrees Celsius. The question is, though, how useful is reading people's temperatures in stopping the spread of coronavirus?
People have variable core body temperatures, so the range is between 36.5 to 37.5, but there is some variability here, so that data itself might not be that useful. Second, there are an increasing amount of evidence showing that a larger number of people are asymptomatic, so even if you do not develop a fever, then you can still go on to infect others.
For the most part these days especially, I would imagine most people who are feeling ill would put their hand up first and say, I'm not feeling well, that, there is something wrong. And they wouldn't try and fool the device, for example, by taking ibuprofen or paracetamol, which would bring their temperature down anyway if it was only slightly elevated. So the practical utility of this idea seems to me rather limited. But Vodafone feels it's still worthwhile.
It is very possible to have false positives and to miss people coming through. However, we think we'll catch or identify enough people that it's still a valuable tool to add to our toolkit for creating a safe working environment while we wait for a vaccine for COVID-19.
So instead of just taking a one-off temperature measurement, you could look at taking continuous ones and even add data from other vital signs too. In fact, that's just what this trial's doing. Liechtenstein, a principality with a population of only 38,000, is piloting a program to fit its citizens with biometric bracelets in a drive to track potential cases of COVID-19 in real time.
And you compare that to yesterday, within a 24-hour period, we had about 1,000 deaths due to COVID-19. So there's another concept here that's illustrated in this graph that's about excess deaths. And that's comparing the number of deaths that we normally would have compared to what it is that we have now. And that's attributable to not only COVID-19 directly, but also causes associated with it as well. And I think that just paints the picture of the awful toll that COVID-19 is having in our country.
Sanjay, this question Dot in Alabama sent in. It reads, I hear about the addition of plexiglass barriers, such as in front of the cashier, maybe for tables in a restaurant. How well do these work? Do they offer much protection?
Yeah, I think that they can offer a fair amount of protection, just basically creating a physical barrier between somebody who may have the virus, maybe not even know it, and somebody who could potentially contract the virus. So it's not foolproof by any means, and I think that that's something that we have to keep emphasizing. These are all parts of things in the toolbox to try and reduce transmission. I think we're going to see a lot of these plexiglass barriers in all sorts of different places. But again, it's not that you no longer have to physically distance them or past them. It's not in lieu of, these are in addition to measures.
And I know you went to a restaurant to kind of show some of the better ways to do the best you can dining out safely. Let's take a look.
First thing you want to do is just sort of take a look around. Does the bar area look too crowded? Is it too crowded at the entrance area? How about the physical distance of the tables? If any of those are problematic, you should probably walk out. Second, I'm wearing a mask. I'm obviously not going to wear the mask when I eat, but you're going to have a hard time maintaining physical distance, so wear the mask. If you're going to go to the bathroom, anything, you have the mask. I also am one of those people who now carries hand sanitizer with me everywhere I go. You should probably as well. Also, if your restaurant has an online menu, check it out ahead of time. That's going to cut down on the number of surfaces you have to touch. One thing about this restaurant is that they disinfect in between each customer. Someone coming around, wiping down the table, wiping down the chairs. If they're not doing that, you may want to bring your own wipes if possible and do it yourself. If you can eat outside, that would be preferable and safer as well, but that's not always possible. So if you're sitting inside, try and think about finding a table that's not in a heavy traffic area. Eat off hours if you can. And also keep this point in mind. A close contact is defined by someone who's within 6 feet, but also for around 15 minutes or more. Those are the types of exposures you want to try and reduce. Now, you obviously can't eat with a mask on. I do want to remind people that this is not a foodborne illness. You can't get this virus from eating it, from breathing it in, or touching your eyes, your nose, or your mouth. So this should be safe and good to go. Now, if you are going to go out to eat, it's probably best to eat with your family or the family unit. If you're going to go out with people that you haven't seen in a while, have some idea. Have they been doing a good job of staying safe? Because how they've been behaving is going to affect you. There's so much to think about now when you go out to eat. You just have to pay attention to all these things. One thing, if you're not up to it yet, you can still order food out from these places, help the restaurant industry, but have the food delivered instead of going there yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I live in New York. I'm doing takeout. So I don't really know how to do anything in the kitchen except make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, which I'm eating a lot of. But sometimes I would feel nervous going out to a restaurant at this point still. Well, obviously, they're not open in New York, so I don't have to make that choice. You stand up.
Yeah, me too. And I think a lot of it's because, I just talked about all the things that you should pay attention to, but so much is dependent on how everyone else is behaving as well. And, if you're with your own family or people that you've been quarantined with in some way or staying at home with, you have an idea, but you don't know about everyone else in the restaurant. I think people are generally doing a good job, but it just takes one person who may be unknowingly carrying the virus to potentially start spreading it.
This is a question Paulina sent in from Mexico City, which reads, how come my whole family tested positive and I tested negative for COVID-19 for all living under the same roof? Why might that be, Sanjay?
Well, that's interesting. So, obviously, if your whole family's tested positive and you have not, there's a good chance you're exposed, first of all. I think that's the sort of point of the question. So, there's two things that come to mind. One is that there are these false negative tests. People get tested and it comes back as a false negative. Second thing is, just because you're exposed doesn't necessarily mean you're going to become infected. And it's not to minimize this virus, but for some reason there are people, for whatever reason, something different genetically, who get exposed to the virus but combat it, and the virus is never able to take hold in their body.
Dr. Leah in Chicago sent in this video. Let's take a look.
Are masks with exhaust valves dumping air into the environment where it could spread the virus from an asymptomatic carrier? If so, should these masks be legal?
Dr. Wham, there's a lot of types of masks out there. What about the question?
Yeah, so we can think about the masks that are available as in three categories. One is the N95 mask, which is the gold standard to protect the wearer, but these are in short supply and we should reserve them for healthcare workers who really need them and are exposed to a lot of virus. The second type is the type that all of us should be wearing, which is a surgical mask or a cloth mask that covers our nose and our mouth. That protects other people from us if we're asymptomatic carriers, and studies are now clear that if all of us wear masks, we reduce the rate of transmission in the community. Now the mask that Leah is referring to is kind of the opposite of that. It's a one-way valve that protects the wearer but expels the virus into the air, and there is really no place for that during this pandemic.
All right, Dr. Nguyen, as always, thanks so much. Great to see you. Just ahead, actress Taraji P. Henson joins us to discuss the mental health aspects of disease that has disproportionately affected the African-American community, what her foundation designed to fight those stigmas is doing to help, and how what's happening in Minnesota around the killing of George Floyd is compounding, of course, the mental toll.
Air quality update in association with CumpaCris. Your eyes on Earth.
I'm a Stuart in the city of London, and this is CNN. City of being cooped up at home could.
Porque la empresa es una auténtica basura, pero para blanquear dinero viene estupendamente, igual que las empresas unicornio de Silicon Valley.
Aquí lo importante no son las empresas o las operaciones como tales, como los pozos de fracturación hidráulica, sino saber cuál es la actividad ilícita que hay detrás, igual que todos sabemos por qué los cárteles de la droga tienen que blanquear dinero. Pues bien, si todas las empresas que forman parte del sistema pierden dinero casi a propósito, eso no solo le confiere a la deuda un lugar preponderante, sino que además sirve para blanquear nuestras ideas y conceptos. ¿Cómo acabamos, por ejemplo, con el feudalismo? Pues cambiando nuestras ideas, asumiendo que el rey no está ahí por una cuestión de derecho divino, sino que somos todos iguales. Eso fue lo que pasó con la llegada de la Ilustración, que todos nos dimos cuenta de que somos individuos soberanos y por tanto no tenemos por qué ponernos de rodillas ante nadie. Pues bien, ahora están intentando hacer lo mismo, solo que en la dirección opuesta. Estos amantes del feudalismo han aprendido de la historia, por eso han añadido un montón de paja para que parezca que todo esto es un juego divertido y que se premia a las empresas unicornio, porque sus directivos son multimillonarios.
Es lo que tiene el blanqueo de dinero.
¿El blanqueo?
Todos los cárteles son rentables, hasta que todos mueren.
Exacto, insisto, no hablamos de ninguna operación concreta, sino que más bien se lo achacamos a todo el sistema. Vamos a ver qué más cuenta el artículo de Wall Street. Estas empresas pierden dinero a raudales incluso en las épocas de mayor bonanza. Así es como están diseñadas, así es como se premia a sus directivos y así es como los inversores quieren que funcionen. Su capacidad para destruir a sus sectores pasa por no adherirse a un principio fundamental, el de que toda empresa debe tener la capacidad de autosostenerse.
Tiene razón, no hablamos de ninguna empresa concreta, simplemente comparamos el sistema con el de un narcoestado, porque eso es lo que tenemos.
Eso es.
Un narcoestado como alguno de los que hay en Sudamérica que se articulan en torno a la droga. O bueno, por ser más preciso, un estado obsesionado con la emisión de moneda que realiza operaciones de blanqueo como un narcoestado. Mira, voy a revelarte lo que le dice Jamie Dimon a Jerome Powell cuando acude a su oficina en Washington. Mira, Jamie, hoy tengo pensado perder $1.000 millones. Así que necesito que me des 3.000, ¿de acuerdo? Porque si no, mi amiguito te va a partir las piernas. Y Jerome Powell le contesta: por favor, Jamie, no me partas las piernas, aquí tienes tus 3.000 millones. Así funcionan las cosas. Este es Jerome Powell implorando a Jamie Dimon: no me mate, prometo emitir todo el dinero posible. Como ven, Estados Unidos se ha convertido en un narcoestado, en una operación de blanqueo de dinero. Y cuando quiebre le prenderán fuego. ¿Alguien tiene malvaviscos? En fin, les esperamos en la puerta de la pausa con muchas más salchichas asadas. No se vayan.
RT llega a millones de hogares en todo el país. Ahora RT llama a su puerta. Canal 353 del paquete básico de la plataforma Dish.
Lo veo en el patio.
No les importó.
The genes of half of the population. He's had a massive head start in trying to work out why the coronavirus affects some people worse than others.
This team has been working together for almost a quarter of a century, and it is almost like everything else we have done. It feels like that it was merely a preparation. We have enormous amount of data on the people who got infected. We are in a privileged position to look at the genetics of the patients and see how the genetics influences the probability of getting infected and the probability of getting seriously ill when you become infected.
Decode has now tested nearly 14% of the population for the coronavirus, the highest in any country. And that's really informed our understanding of COVID-19. For example, he says that, contrary to some reports, it seems that nearly everyone who has the disease does eventually display symptoms. And the race is now on to understand why those symptoms range so wildly from the very mild to the very severe.
Is it because they previously caught a different coronavirus and developed some immunity? Or is it to do with different strains of the virus itself? Viruses naturally mutate as they travel from one person to another, and as this one has spread, it's morphed into many different strains that can be identified from its genetic data, and which are being shared by scientists across the world. What's not known at the moment is whether some strains are more harmful than others.
When viruses mutate, they usually mutate to become more infectious and less harmful, because the evolutionary goal of the virus is to go as widely as possible, to become as many as possible. And if a virus causes a serious disease, then it limits the transmission, because the person who becomes seriously ill is not going to move around to spread the virus. But this virus has found a way around this, because most people are
Nuestra misión es contener al enemigo hasta que lleguen los refuerzos y proteger nuestros cañones antiaéreos. La batería impedirá volar a sus bombarderos.
Because of economic status, because of past traumas that we haven't even addressed, because of the stigma around mental health. I had to do something, so we created a virtual fundraising campaign for free sessions.
Defiendan el puesto de mando y la información secreta que contiene.
Disadvantaged neighborhoods. I'm so nervous. There's so much going on right now. My brain is just. I apologize.
I mean, to talk about the virus, but also what has happened to Mr. Floyd. I mean, it's just.
Yeah. It's just like it won't let up.
Están tomando el puesto de mando.
I'm trying to stop a bleeding wound, and it just keeps bleeding, you know.
Defiende el puesto de mando, soldado.
I'm raising money to help those who can't, who feel like they're suffocating right now, who feel like they can't talk to anyone. We're giving away free sessions. We're asking for the public's help. We've helped over 1,500 people in need. We have over 500
Están asaltando el puesto de mando.
You can check us out at the BorisLHensonFoundation.org. Or you can check us out.
No permitan que asalten el puesto de mando.
707070. We're trying to help 1,500 more people. Our first session was over. We're going to start our second session at the end of next week. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Están tomando el puesto de mando.
I wonder if, with the onset of coronavirus, the foundation was then set up to specifically help Black and Brown communities get free access. Can you just tell us a little bit more about how that works? How do people access the program?
Protejan el puesto de mando. Protejan el puesto de mando.
Reaching out to the Boris Henson Foundation, as Ms. Henson shared. You can reach out through the web. And there's more information on their website. And I think
el enemigo capturó nuestro puesto de mando, pero la batalla aún no termina.
Impidan
que el enemigo reconstruya el puente que destruimos. Si lo hacen, su tanque avanzará. Viene un lanzamiento. Están construyendo un puente. Impidan que el enemigo construya el puente. El enemigo está construyendo un puente. Están construyendo el puente. Solo queda la mitad del puente. Están construyendo un puente. No permitan que el enemigo construya el puente. El enemigo está construyendo un puente. Están construyendo el puente. El enemigo construyó el puente, pero hay que seguir combatiendo. Los refuerzos están en camino. Defiendan el suministro de munición. Si lo destruyen, no podremos usar los cañones antiaéreos. Viene un lanzamiento. Protejan el suministro de munición.
We're supposed to get up and smile and go to work with this weight on us. It's too much. And at some point, as a human, you will crack.
Colocaron una bomba en el suministro de munición.
It's okay. And my hope is that we eradicate the stigma around mental health in the black community, because we've been taught to pray it away.
Que no destruyan el suministro de munición.
Don't tell me to be strong. Being strong dehumanizes me.
Desarmen la bomba.
My trauma, and it makes it small. I'm human. I have a right to fear. I have a right to be scared.
Hay que desarmar la bomba.
You know, if I get shot, I bleed and I die, just like the next human. So, the fact that we're not even looked at as humans right now is what's quite disturbing.
Vienen refuerzos para proteger el suministro de munición.
I think what Ms. Hansen is also expressing is what we would describe.
El enemigo destruyó el suministro de munición, pero la batalla aún no termina. Pidan que el enemigo escolte el tanque para que no dispare a nuestros cañones antiaéreos. El tanque enemigo está avanzando. Viene un lanzamiento. El tanque se mueve. Maten a los soldados alrededor del tanque. Su tanque está avanzando. Traigan el lanzallamas. El tanque enemigo está avanzando. Destruyeron uno de nuestros cañones antiaéreos. El tanque se mueve.
After 20 years as an experienced researcher, first at Duke, then at Georgetown, and now with the Coleman Project.
El tanque enemigo está avanzando. Que no destruyan los cañones antiaéreos.
What we spent our life's blood,
el tanque se mueve.
Getting black people into care.
Ataquen a los enemigos cerca del tanque.
95% of the people who have used
su tanque está avanzando. Maten a los soldados alrededor del tanque.
That's tremendous for eradicating stigma. So I just commend all of us for the work, and I commend Ms. Henson and Tracy J, the director, for the effort that they put into trying to make this better for all of us.
Su tanque retrocede. El tanque está dando la vuelta. Quedan 2 minutos para que lleguen nuestros refuerzos. El enemigo destruyó nuestros cañones antiaéreos. Ahora nos podrán atacar por el aire.
This is so important. The more we normalize the conversation, the more people will feel at ease to talk about it. I mean, how can you take care of your body from the neck down? Your mind is such a huge part of your body and its function, and you have to care for it. You must. And I think people misconstrue the meaning of strength. Strength is not raw. It's not a vibrato. You know, you're so much stronger in your vulnerability. And that's what I need my people to understand. It's okay to feel. You're human. It's okay.
I would agree 100%. It is okay to feel. It is okay to express those feelings. That's a normal part of our developmental process. And I think just as Ms. Henson is saying, if we don't do it,